We're going to talk for a few minutes to a man you've seen down on stage. Please welcome Elliott Forrest. Hey, Elliott.
Hey, buddy.
You
Thanks
got
for
some
having me,
jokes
man.
for me? You got some jokes for me? Now that was pretty good. He's going to sink his teeth into the sound.
I have two goals with these things. Get a few laughs and keep it rolling.
Right. Well, you did both, and also I really liked. And now finally, our final finalist. That was pretty good.
You know,
it's almost like you've done this kind of thing before.
Well, I've hosted a lot of events, maybe 60 at Carnegie Hall, but I've worked with Peter Schickley, Professor Peter Schickley, the PDQ bot guy, for 30 years, and I just learned a lot about humor and classical music and how classical music audiences really like that sort of thing.
Respond to a little understated. Plus, your humor kind of sneaked up on everybody. They weren't quite expecting it.
Right, good.
Oh, you've hosted 60 events at Carnegie Hall, live from Lincoln Center. You've helped in production there. You have been the drive time host at WQXR for how long?
Well, I've been hosting in the afternoon now for a year, but I did it a while ago. But all told, I've been on the classical radio in New York this coming November, 30 years.
Well,
and at WQXR for 12.
You might think about making it a career.
It might.
Are you going to do it when you grow up?
Yeah, I'll stick around with it. You know, frankly, it's not something I expected when I started out in my career.
What did you expect?
I have a degree in theater, and I have directed and produced, and actually I continue to produce and direct large-scale symphony concerts even now. I've been able to bring it all together after decades of broadcasting and a background and a career in producing. I started about 10 years ago starting to produce large-scale symphony concerts.
And
so I've
what
able
do you
to
mean
put
by
the,
that, large-scale symphony concerts?
I produced the concert version of Goethe Dämmerung at the Hollywood Bowl. So
wow, that's on a large scale.
Yeah, they came to us.
5 hours?
Well, it was just Goethe Dämmerung, so it was the last 90 minutes of the 14-hour opera, just the last part of it. But I add projections and lighting. I've worked with the Houston Symphony here in Texas. I've created 2 shows for the Philadelphia Orchestra. So it's a way for me to pull all that together, and it's just been great fun.
So that is a lot of balls to keep in the air, though, with something like the last act of Goethe Dämmerung. If you have projections, you have singers on the stage, you have a huge orchestra.
And real fire. We use real fire and real smoke in there because...
Well, you're outside.
Yeah, exactly. My goal is to use more real fire indoors, but it hasn't happened yet.
How does that dovetail with your career as a broadcaster? I mean, you can leave on the weekend and go do these shows?
I have a generous vacation package, and I'll go off and do a show for a week, and I'll sleep when I'm dead. Basically,
there you go.
It's my philosophy. I started these large-scale concerts about 10 years ago, and it's just been great. I've been traveling around the country producing them.
How did it happen? How did it first happen to bring all the pieces of you together?
Well, I mean, there's sort of a straight line because I grew up in West Texas.
In Midland.
In Midland is where I grew up, and at 19 years of age, I decided I wanted to produce a musical in the park and walked into a bank and said, I want to produce a musical in the park, and we're not going to charge any money, but we want the audience to come, so I think you should give me some money for that.
And they did.
And they did. And they said, now go to these other 2 banks, and they'll give you some money too, and they did. So this idea that I could just sort of get people to give me money to produce for the arts in the communities that I live in has something that has replicated itself through my entire life.
It's always been true. In every community you've lived in, people have given you money to produce large-scale.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you must have a good pitch then. If you just walk into a bank in Midland and say, probably you say a little more than, I want to put on a concert in the park and give me money.
Well,
at 19, though, we know no fear at 19.
We know no fear at 19, and I've sort of kept that up. But I think part of that is that I believe strongly that the arts is like a police force or a hospital, that they belong in every community. And that if in certain communities that I've lived in didn't have professional performing arts, or I found a hole in an area where I thought that the audiences would come and respond, then I thought it was my duty to make sure that happened.
So how did you get from Midland? Was there an intermediate stop between Midland, obviously, and New York?
There was.
Or did you go straight there?
No, I went to Midland. I was born and raised I was actually born in San Angelo, but grew up in Midland. Went to the University of Texas in Austin for my degree in theater, then moved to Kansas City, Missouri. And I went there for a theater job, and one afternoon, the theater company said, "Oh, you have a nice voice. You've been on the radio. go to this radio station to record a public service announcement. And the radio station that I had been on in my hometown in Midland when I was 17 was what used to be called a beautiful music station. You know, it was, you know, Burt Bacharach and Hal David and Montavani. And when we'd really go crazy, we'd play Barbra Streisand. So
you had to use your soft voice.
Right, it was more kind of
breathy,
like,
a little breathy.
So in Kansas City, they sent me to this radio station. I recorded the PSA. It was a classical radio station, and I said, "You guys don't need anybody, do you?" Because I wasn't making that much money at this theater company in Kansas City. And they said, "Yeah, we're looking for an afternoon announcer," and I auditioned, got the job right away. Little did I know that day changed the course of the rest of my life.
It did.
Because I was on classical radio for a year and a half in Kansas City, decided to move to New York. Within a few years of being in New York, a classical radio station, WNCN, was looking for younger people who knew the format. I was exactly the right person that they were looking for. And then A&E Television, and then QXR, and it just sort of kept happening.
Was there a learning curve for you at all? I mean, announcing on a classical music station, there was a lot of pronunciation, there was a lot of repertoire. For somebody with a theater background, did you also have a classical music background?
I was in the orchestra in high school,
okay.
So we played. But you know, when you're in an orchestra in high school, you play like 3 pieces a year, you know, and you just like work it. And I must say, the music departments, as I'm sure you know, in Texas, are very serious. They take music very serious, marching band, whatever it is. So I knew a little bit, but we had a lot of people come through Kansas City, and one of the first ones, as I mentioned, was Peter Schickley, which started a very long relationship I've had with him. I've been on his albums, I've been on his stage, but the very first time he came on the radio station, and I was 24, 25 years old, and I'd been on classical radio for a couple of months at that point, and off air he said, "You're going to learn a lot from the back of record jackets." So you know, between being a fast study and having an ear for voices because of my theater background and a little bit from high school, and now in these situations, I have sat down with almost everybody. You know, A&E Television for 12 years. I sat down. You know, I've interviewed Domingo and Pavarotti and James Galway and Renee Fleming and all the big people. And you have to know your stuff. You can't show up and suck. You know, you've got to be able to know what you're talking about. My goal is not to suck.
So far, you've done really well here today. I mean, you've done really fantastically well.
It's been great on stage. I can't believe these amateurs. These are amazing performers.
It's really inspiring, right?
It is.
It's very inspiring.
It's amazing to me that these people have other jobs, that they have other lives, that they're so poised in front of a full audience. I mean, I don't know the full preliminary. Maybe you can tell me, but I'm sure they've been playing solo pieces in their homes for a long time. How many times have they played with an orchestra?
Right, exactly right. But you know, we found this time, this is the 7th time we've done this now in Fort Worth. The first of these competitions was in 1999. But we've never had an orchestral round before.
Oh.
But we found in the application process that so many people said, "I wouldn't have applied, but there's an orchestral round here, and it's always been a dream of mine to play with an orchestra," or "I haven't played with an orchestra since I was 11," or "the last time I played with an orchestra didn't go so well, I want to redeem myself."
Right.
But there was a huge attraction in playing with an orchestra. But yes, you're right. I mean, the level is very, very high. What we find here at the Cliburn is that it's higher every time we produce the competition. It's just like the professional competition, in which, you know, the kids that come every 4 years are appreciably on a higher level than the ones 4 years before. Now we find that to be true in the amateur competition as well. The very first time we did the amateur competition was a lot of fun, actually, because we cast a very wide net. We didn't really have a screening process. We just took everybody. So you got all kinds of levels. You know, you got all kinds of surprises on both ends of the spectrum, which made it very, very lively and interesting, but less like a real competition. This way, it's sort of standardized the product a little bit, so that you know that you're always going to get something good every time somebody walks out there. But yeah, you know, you ask the people, when do you find time to practice? You have a busy medical practice.
Right.
You have
and
3 kids.
All professionals too, which is very interesting.
And they say 5 in the morning. I practice at 5 in the morning, or when I get home from work, or at midnight with my headphones, with my electronic keyboard. But they are very driven to do it. We've had a contestant this time who describes herself as a stay-at-home mother. She's 47. She describes herself as a stay-at-home mother from New York. She was going to have a piano career, but she broke her wrist on some ice, and then she pivoted to a career in law, which she was a trademark lawyer for 20 years, and then she developed MS. And she was here, and she had to have a little help the first time she played. She had to have a little help getting onto the stage, but she played all of the big virtuoso pieces in the repertoire. She was not letting that stop her. And she said, even in her bio, she said, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. I believe very strongly in the concept of personal best. And also, I want to do this for my 9-year-old daughter to show her that you can achieve your dreams even in the face of obstacles, even in the face of really tough obstacles. So we have people like that as well. It's always incredibly inspiring.
It's incredible, really, and as you said, on the professional level as well as the amateurs, you know, this moment I told you about being really the first time I walked into this classical radio station, and even then, this is decades ago. This is 30 years ago. To hear about the graying of the audience and classical music is dying.
It's dying.
You know, I've been hearing this for decades and decades, and every year that goes by, I see that the level of education in this area gets higher and higher. That the young people who are involved in it. I mean, in New York City, I don't know so much about Fort Worth, but the Knights is an ensemble of, you know, young people that are performing, and they perform all over the place. So I'm very encouraged about this kind of music, both for performance as well as recordings and radio and people's professions.
You know, I think it's Charles Rosen who said, did you ever interview Charles Rosen? Such a funny guy.
Yeah.
Very, very, very smart guy. The author of the classical style, and
yes.
pianist, and he could do anything. PhD in French literature, just one of those people. Anyway, he said that the graying of the audience and classical music dying was perhaps its oldest tradition.
Well, the other thing I always say too is that what I've noticed is that there are, as far as the audience getting older, there's new old people every day.
Of course, right? Because a lot of people, what we find is that people really don't start coming to classical music events until they're in their 40s or about 50. The kids have left the house and so forth, and they're looking for that kind of entertainment, something they could stay on.
Also,
I
think
there's an evening, and
there's a bit of a theory, and you know, I'm not alone in this, that you love the music that you grew up with in your 12, 13, 14 teenage years. You come.
Absolutely.
So now if you get to 40 or 50, you've been listening, in my case, to the music of the 70s for so long, you go, you know what? I don't think I want to hear that anymore.
I don't want to hear that.
I loved it, and it's part of me, but I think there's something deeper.
You're moving on.
I'm moving on. It takes a while.
What else do you do this summer? Any fun projects?
A couple of things. I'm working on some projects that are coming up. These large-scale symphony concerts that I produce. I have one in Long Beach coming up, and another one in Arkansas with an orchestra in Arkansas. We have a concept that we're working on right now called Comic Book Live for orchestras, in which we combine comic books and live music and actors all together.
Where do the concepts start? Do they start with you?
I work very closely with conductors. In some cases, it's the conductor's idea, and we work and they pick the repertoire. I've had a couple of them where the venue, particularly the Mann Center in Philadelphia, which seats 14,000 seats, Kathy Cahill, who runs that, called me and said, I want to do something called Symphonic Sports-tacular. And because we had done,
she had the title.
Well, we had the year before, she and I had done Symphonic Spectacular, and she said, I've always wanted to combine classical music and sports, and no one in Philadelphia, and I dare say really very many people around the country, have combined all the major sports teams with their orchestra. So we had the title, and we didn't have a conductor, and she said, I have a grant due tomorrow. What's the repertoire? And I went, it may change, but here's. So I wrote I picked the repertoire. Then I went to every sports team in Philadelphia. I went to the Eagles and the Flyers and went to all their video departments and said, I want high-def reels, I want high-def images, I want a blooper reel, I want your highlight reel. And we had to make deals with licensees. We had to work with the NFL. And it was spectacular. It turned into this event, and of course audiences came that had never been to a symphony orchestra concert before, because they knew they were going to see highlights from sports to classical music. And I'll just give you one idea. I took some really great footage from basketball, these huge leaps and these beautiful balletic movements, slowed them down and put it to the music of Tchaikovsky.
Ballets?
Yes, because I saw that this balletic movement in basketball really made sense.
Fantastic.
So that was one example of what we did.
You know, Elliott, you would have been a success in your life had you been a self-starter, I think.
Well,
Had you had some ideas, you would
I
have been
determined a
successful,
long
but
time
it's too late now.
I determined a long time ago that there's two ways to do things in life, and that is to be a part of someone else's gig or start your own. And for the most part, I've always done both, and I like them both. I like having a full-time job. I got 2 kids in college. I like paying bills, and I like being creative and starting things. So I like doing both.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for
Buddy,
joining us.
thank you so much.
We'll see you on stage here whenever they decide to come
We're
back.
waiting for the award ceremony. Who's going to win? Do we have any idea? I don't know.
It's one of 6. I've narrowed it down to 6.
Oh, all right. Oh, you're psychic.
But one
All
of the
right.
6 is going to win.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Elliott.
All right.